Welcome to Good Game, the show for gamers by gamers. I'm Hex.
And I'm Bajo. Oh, what have you been up to, Hex? I've been riding motorbikes with Goose in the latest Battlefield DLC, and even though some of the maps are really tight and
as much as I would love to hear extremely detailed story about motorbikes and Battlefield, we do have quite a few games to get through this week. Finally, we have Bioshock Infinite.
Will you stop it? Not here to hurt you.
Who are you?
And bullets fly in Gears of War Judgement.
And it's been described as the Empire Strikes Back of the StarCraft saga, StarCraft 2: Heart of the Swarm.
But first, can you guess the game for this week? So no time for stories this week?
Look, I'll go read the news.
Yeah.
Then if we get through all the game reviews, you can tell me a motorbike story.
Okay, cool. So what I like to do is strap C4 to the motorbike and then just ride it straight down the train tracks of this one particular map and then just jump off and let the bike keep going and then it explodes and take out a tank. That way. I used to do it with the quad bikes in Battlefield Bad Company too.
Good game.
Following the disastrous launch of SimCity, developer Maxis insisted the game required its controversial always-online connection to offload a significant amount of the calculations to cloud servers, as we reported in our review. However, a hacker managed to enable the game's debug mode and play the game offline indefinitely, debunking claims the game uses cloud computing to assist the simulation aspects, or that it would require significant engineering to create an offline mode. John Riccatello has resigned as the CEO of publisher Electronic Arts. In his resignation letter, he said that the decision came down to the company's recent underperformance and that he was ultimately accountable for it. He was appointed CEO in 2007, during which time he oversaw several missteps, including the underperforming Star Wars: The Old Republic MMO, the critically panned Medal of Honor games, and the recent SimCity launch debacle. Media Molecule's studio director Siobhan Reddy has been named Australian Woman of the Year. Ms. Reddy received a return business class ticket to Australia as well as a video message from Prime Minister Julia Gillard to congratulate her on the award. Earlier in the year, she was also named by the BBC as one of the 100 most powerful women in the United Kingdom. She says the award has been a rocket up the bum and encouraged her to try and get more young women involved with games.
Up you trot! There's a good fellow! I need to make sure you're match fit for the Alliance!
Good game.
It's been almost 3 years since StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty came out with its somewhat controversial Terran-only campaign, but now it's time to zerg it up with its first expansion, Heart of the Swarm.
Moved heaven and earth to bring you back, Sarah.
I am the Swarm.
I never gave up on you. Don't you give up on us!
The campaign picks up from the end of Wings of Liberty. Old Jim Raynor has rescued his forbidden love Sarah Kerrigan, aka Queen of Blades, leader of the Zerg. And after locking her away in a research lab, they've managed to mostly transform her back into a human. Although clearly Zerg DNA is tricky to get out of your hair.
This reminds me of the old days.
My hair's got more gray in it.
And my hair's got more Zerg.
Kerrigan gets dramatically split up from Raynor, launching her on a crusade to reclaim her crown as the Queen of Blades, reunite the Zerg swarm, and enact vengeance on those who would keep them apart.
Destination, Zerg space.
Confirmed.
It's pretty much the most ridiculous love story you could ever imagine.
Yes, but it's told well through Blizzard's trademark beautiful cinematics. And much like Wings of Liberty's Hyperion, here you have the Leviathan to act as a home base between missions where you can chat to a motley crew of Zerg for extra tidbits of story.
Your strategy against the Terrans was strange, but I understand it now.
It's not quite as enjoyable as the Hyperion though, which felt like a warm, welcoming home complete with bar and TV and arcade games. This just felt like a weak reskin with a bunch of weird aliens to talk to.
It does have its practical purposes though.
Raptor strain leaps to close on enemy.
It's where you can evolve your swarm through evolution missions, which test out 2 possible evolutions for a unit before forcing you to choose one. You can also level up Kerrigan after you earn enough experience and pick out special powers and abilities.
And you can pick special mutations for each of your units, leading to an impressive amount of customization options for your swarm. And these do dramatically affect what strategies you'll use out on the field. Other than your one-off evolution choices, you're free to change them at any time and experiment with what works best for you as well.
Personally, I like the evolution which lets your Zerglings spawn instantly in packs of 3, combined with Kerrigan's ability to let them respawn for free when they died. So you just have this endless swarm of Zerglings. Crawl, my pretties! I love how gross the Zerg are. It's one of the high points of this campaign.
The missions themselves are all masterfully designed. You almost always have some big problem to deal with while constantly being thrown lots of little challenges to keep you on your toes. And I really liked how you almost always have Kerrigan or another special character with you, and using their special abilities is generally essential to success. It's like they've just popped a bit of Diablo in my StarCraft.
It's the perfect learning curve too, teaching you the ins and outs of each unit and then testing what you've learned. And more levels now feature environmental hazards like lava surges, flash freeze storms, or poisonous gas attacks.
The infested will die.
And even a few boss battles to mix up the strategy.
Yeah, that being said, they do play it quite safe, don't they? I mean, it all feels very familiar. And I understand with a series like StarCraft, you know, they have a formula that works and it's well loved, and fans will get upset if they mess with it too much. I just wish they'd taken a few more risks with the campaign.
Yeah, it is quite a traditional real-time strategy game, isn't it? And to me, it feels like I'm coming home to an old friend, though, so I didn't mind that so much. One thing I think people will have a lot of fun with, though, is the Master Archive. This lets you go back into the campaign missions and tweak all sorts of parameters to change things up. All in all, it's a solid campaign with a decent length, but we should talk about the multiplayer, Hex.
Yes, now as a disclaimer, we are not pro players, we're not even very good players, and we play online almost always ends in a slaughter, so we're not really in a position to talk about, you know, the intricacies of how the new units affect the balance. But there are 7 new units all up, including the Hellbat and Widow Mines for the Terrans, the Swarm Host and Viper for the Zerg, and the Mothership Core, Oracle, and Tempest for the Protoss.
A few new units may not sound like that big a deal, but when it comes to the competitive scene, it's quite a substantial difference. And there's also 26 new maps, which is a hefty addition.
Now, we actually reached out to Toby Lee, who is the esports facilitator for some of Australia's pro community, to get his take. He basically likened the additions to adding new pieces to a chessboard or new positions on a footy team that could pass the ball forward. So they do change the dynamic quite a lot, and yet they've done a good job of balancing them, as we'd expect. But, you know, at its core, this is still the same great multiplayer game we got with Wings of Liberty.
The community features have been improved as well, and there's now support for groups and clans in the game. But the best new feature is Take Command, and this option lets you start playing the game from a saved replay, so you can take control of a famous pro match for yourself. And that's a fantastic feature, and on top of that, now you can recover games if you lose connection.
Well, we should wrap this up. Final thoughts?
Well, I think people already know if they want to get this game. It really is a refinement of something that was already very, very good, so I'm giving it 8.5.
It's an 8 from me.
Good game. Let's set up.
Gears of War has become one of the most popular shooters of this console generation. There's just one problem. The last game wrapped up the trilogy. Solution? They made a prequel. Gears of War Judgement takes us back to the days following first contact on Emergence Day.
Stay here and defend this area. The east wing is getting hammered.
The first thing you notice is the default heroes Marcus and Dom are missing from this game. This story focuses on Baird and Cole and their role in the first conflict.
Move, Lieutenant Baird.
For those not up to speed on their Gears lore, on Emergence Day, humanity was blindsided by an invasion force of monsters. Except instead of arriving in spaceships, they tunneled up from underground.
We got a healing canvas!
The problem is the military dismissed the Locust as a small threat. However, Baird and his Kilo team know the real danger, and they try and stop them the only way they know how, by disobeying orders and blowing stuff up. Hex, Did you miss Marcus, and how did you find the focus on Baird?
I mean, the thing about Gears characters is that they're all production line beefcakes. They've just swapped out one guy with more muscles for brains with another, except he wears goggles instead of Marcus's bandana.
Does that sound about right to you, Lieutenant Baird?
And occasionally one of them gets upset about his dead wife.
Baird still kicks down every door, yells a lot, and shoots everything in sight, and the dialogue is as cheesy as ever.
So this is the UIR sniper rifle.
This isn't a gun. It's a comrade.
But you know what, Badge? We've never really looked to Gears of War for in-depth characterization, have we?
No, in fact, whenever they have tried to develop characters or make an interesting story moment, it always comes across a bit silly and out of place. But this game looked incredible, doesn't it? If you think about the 360, it's 7-year-old technology now, and yet they still make these games look better with each iteration. You'll get to fight in some huge war-torn locations, and there's a bit of a World War II vibe at play, with this mission evoking the bombing of London. Plus, this level is clearly inspired by the famous Omaha Beach landing. And despite all of this intense action, I found myself getting distracted by some exquisite architecture. Obviously from the Georgian era.
Well, predates the Georgian era, I think.
Bit of Art Deco. Or distracted by a nice sunset. Oh, look at that. Isn't that nice?
Oh, that's just pretty. You and your 4-person Kilo squad will carve your way through thousands of locusts, usually with bullets, but sometimes your gun's chainsaw is needed. He had to split. Yeah, it was Running Man? Yeah, okay.
A big clip of bullets and your combat roll are your best friends here. And when you do want a bit of protection from bullets, you can always grab an enemy's riot shield, or grab an enemy as an inhumane shield.
Don't worry, I'm right behind you.
A lot of the tougher breeds of enemies that we only saw in the 3rd game appear here in the past, especially those freaking centipedes, which I hate. And Judgment introduces new weapons and enemies, which will of course inexplicably disappear in the later games. New guns include this quasi-sniper rifle. It packs plenty of power but doesn't have a scope, so you'll need to shoot from the hip.
I think that was the right move to introduce new weapons and enemies and ignore the continuity stuff there, but when it comes to the story, I wish that was immune to it because it's so overly complicated. It keeps flip-flopping back and forth from Baird's military trial, where the team are giving their testimonies, to the missions which are playable flashbacks. Plus, there are some missions set in the past and some set in the future. In Gears of War 3, I just couldn't keep up with it all.
Yeah, the plot certainly loses its way in the middle, although those courtroom testimonies do offer up an interesting gameplay twist. At the start of each mission, you'll have the choice of testimonial challenges. In one, the Kilo squad claimed the Locusts use advanced flanking tactics. If you choose to accept the challenge and back up their claims, you'll face waves of extra enemies attacking you from behind.
They are clever additions, although I think a lot of people will save it for the second playthrough because they often put restrictions on it with time limits or specific weapons. These challenges also tie into the new rating system. You're scored at the end of each mission. Do lots of skillful stuff like headshots and executions, and you'll gain points. Plus, taking on those testimony challenges gives you a big score bump. But you do lose points every time you fall in battle and need to be revived by a teammate.
I mean, it's not like the gameplay itself lacks challenge. I mean, we often found ourselves in situations where we were surrounded by boss-sized enemies and defeat was almost certain. It's just that every time we failed, one of our AI buddies would pick us back up again. It's just so hard to get engaged in a game when there aren't serious consequences.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And it's only if you care about the points that it's really going to matter if you go down and need that revival. And you can always put it up to insane difficulty.
Yeah, but insane difficulty is only unlocked once you finish the game. And, you know, I shouldn't have to impose rules on myself, like no revives, to get a good challenge out of it. That said, I do think the game was more balanced when we played in co-op.
Ah! Oh, what's that?
That thing is massive! I think you just turn around.
Yeah, baby. Oh, through the ground. Relax, everyone. Hex, help. 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 Hex, help. Oh, it's all right. Now, because we were playing before release, we couldn't test out much of the multiplayer, but we did get to jump into a couple of matches. The main new addition is the Overrun mode. It's an extension of the Horde mode, except human players can now jump onto both sides and play as Locust and Cog in the same match. I find quite often when you get to play as the non-human characters in these kind of games, the controls are always really wonky or not ironed out properly, but everything here felt tight, and there's a lot to get your head around.
I love being that suicide bug. What a jerk. For death and glory.
But we should wrap this up. Final thoughts, Hex?
Well, there's no denying this is a solid game. I mean, it looks amazing and the action is constantly dialed up to 11. It just all feels a little bit too familiar, I think. You know, we've had the trilogy and the prequel. I think they need to really shift this into something quite different if they want to continue this franchise. So I'm giving it 8.
Yeah, I agree. There aren't really big changes here, but it is more Gears, and the Gears that is here is good Gears. So I'm giving it 8.5.
Before getting into gaming, I actually worked in the biology field, and I was doing a lot of research on animal behavior and doing simulations on the computer. But really, kind of my night job was that I was a player. I was a sponsored player. I would go to competitions. I had my own team, and eventually formed my own company that was kind of doing that, where we would set up tournament ladders and community sites and that sort of thing, and start producing our own content, working with some developers, working with some hardware companies even.
I've got to save my research. Do you understand how important it is?
I remember my wife would tell me, "Why do you spend so much time on the computer? You're never going to turn that into a real career. You're wasting your time. You're wasting your time." And then lo and behold, I started getting offers that came rolling in. And eventually actually got a full-time job doing it and have never looked back since.
It's done.
My wife has on many occasions admitted that she was wrong and that it actually did work out. And so I am very grateful to have had the career that I've had thus far.
Good game.
Welcome to Columbia, the city in the clouds.
Says he's for faith, family, and father.
The angel Columbia did present herself to
He looks so sad.
Find the devil, good sir, and cast him out.
first throw.
Is a better home awaiting in the sky.
In Bioshock Infinite, you play Booker DeWitt, a professional corpse looter and former Pinkerton. He's a man of questionable moral standing and has agreed to find a girl by the name of Elizabeth to wipe a debt clean.
Excuse me, how much longer?
The city of Columbia seceded from the rest of the world to form their own society, much like Rapture in Bioshock 1. Once you reach the Cloud City, things start off rather pleasant as you wander around one of the most beautiful set pieces we have ever seen in a video game.
The Archangel showed a vision. A city, lighter than air.
But pretty soon you get the sense that not all is as it seems. In fact, there is a very dark underside to this cultish city. Propaganda fills the streets.
Say he can see the future.
Give a man a little power, he falls in all kinds of love with himself.
And a bloody war is brooding between two factions. And racial prejudice echoes themes from the turn of the 19th century. From here on in, we're going to be vague about the story, which is going to be very difficult because it's half of why this game is so compelling, but we just don't want to spoil anything for you.
I think it's fascinating the way this developer has taken that idea of a self-contained city gone to hell in Bioshock 1 and then applied and expanded on that idea in Infinite, but in a completely new and different way. The biggest difference here is that you're not entering a decrepit world already in collapse. In fact, everything seems to be fine upon your arrival to Columbia.
Yeah, Booker plays a more active role in what happens to this city.
Look.
Are you all right?
How could this my home? Why didn't
We should get out of here.
Let's go.
And as things start to fall apart and get torn down, you start to feel a bit of conflict about what you're doing in the game, which is fascinating subject matter.
Jump! I can't do it! I cannot do it! I'm sorry!
Each step you take in this world feels like it has meaning, either to excite you with combat,
What are you doing? Get the girl! Get off!
make you feel something to bring you closer to the characters, or to stir curiosity to drive the story forward and pull you along. Within minutes, you want to know more about the backstory behind Booker and his past, and discover the mystery behind why Elizabeth is so important. But quickly you feel the need to be a hero and attack this injustice that is festering within this society. This is also one of those games which It tells the story around you by what you observe and who you talk to as opposed to directly narrating things to you. And this is helped by having Elizabeth as your companion for most of the game, which pushes that story forward again without the need to listen to every voice recording that you pick up.
Oh, what's that smell?
Ain't no privies down here.
They treat them like animals.
This makes you feel like you're just moving through the world. They've nailed the storytelling here.
Yeah, especially in that early part of the game where everything is set up so well. Once you rescue Elizabeth from her prison, however, things really start to shift as some of the more complex and cerebral ideas of the game begin to unravel. Elizabeth has a darkness to her. There's a power within her which seems very dangerous when combined with her naivety. I mean, really, this is a story about Elizabeth and Booker, and there's some really lovely moments between them.
Will the circle be unbroken?
It's music.
By and by.
Which one's your voice?
The one on the left.
They also have a lot of conflict in their dialogue, which keeps the objectives shifting in dynamic ways.
And where will we get these weapons? From one of our many friends and allies?
A gunsmith in Finkton should be a walk in the park. What do you say, partners?
You're a liar, Mr. DeWitt. And a thug.
She's pretty much a Disney princess that can rip holes in space and time.
Oh, shit. What?
And that bond between them is strengthened by the fact that she's also your ally in combat. Much of the standard gunplay is familiar territory if you played the last couple of Bioshock games, but on a slightly bigger scale. You have your abilities in one hand and your weapons in the other. And the combinations of these produce spectacular results and chain reactions in a firefight.
Perfect timing.
Elizabeth is almost always with you and occasionally will throw you ammo, health, salt for your magic, and even cash.
That'll do.
The holes that she tears open might give you a turret or some ammo, or just a bit of cover. So there are lots of choices that you can make when you approach a fight. When those big heavy guys attack, you absolutely need to make use of everything you can.
It's all very fluid too, and quite thrilling having weapons and ammo just thrown at you in the middle of combat just when you need it most.
Here you go!
Much obliged!
I mean, the best part is you don't have to look after her at all. I mean, this is a companion game where the AI is so good, you don't even have to think about what she's doing. She won't glitch out or get stuck, there's no babysitting. When you're walking along, she'll often go ahead and sometimes comment on things in the environment that take her curiosity.
Hey, Lawless Flintlock. It's the newest one in the series. I read it was delayed 3 times.
You can tell the devs have put a lot of time into her AI, Bajo.
Yeah, absolutely, but no time into those arcade machines. They were rubbish. Elizabeth is one of the reasons why this game is set apart from your standard stop and pop shooter, and there are many reasons why Infinite is different in that respect.
I don't want to talk about that.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have cried.
And when you die, Elizabeth is there to pull you back up, and what I think is the best respawn mechanic I have ever had the pleasure to die for.
Don't die for me, Booker.
But we should talk about the abilities.
Press to turn machines into allies.
Not only do they look spectacular the way they light up the screen, but they're always great fun to use, especially if you use them in combination with buffs from random clothes you find around the place.
My personal favourite is the Bucking Bronco, which launches enemies into the air, giving you lots of breathing room and basically making them sitting ducks. There's also Possession, which makes your enemies your ally for a period of time, and once upgraded, once they stop being your ally, they actually end their own life, which is a pretty dark concept.
Yeah, not as dark as those Alfred Hitchcock birds that you can shoot out of your hands. How about some birds?
Would you like some birds? Yeah, they don't pull any punches, but they do make some time to force you to reflect on the violence that Booker is actually committing. And this happens the first time Elizabeth witnesses him murdering standard goons. She flips out.
Elizabeth!
Stay away from me!
It's so great to see more games finally exploring the seriousness and the consequence of death as a theme.
How do you wash away the things that you've done?
You don't.
Yeah, and I don't think every FPS needs to do it, but I always appreciate it when they do, especially in a game like this where it's such a colourful looking game, but it has this really dark underpinning.
You killed those people.
Elizabeth,
You're a monster.
what did you think was going to happen?
Yeah, and that light and dark contrast is really interesting to watch. I don't think I've ever played an FPS quite like this, Budge. I mean, the first couple of Bioshocks were certainly unique in their setting and themes, but they were all quite dark and moody and even had themes of horror. But this world is bright and vibrant and colourful, but expertly retains that darkness in other ways. It's not just about the look, it's got the gameplay to back it up.
We recently spoke to lead designer on the game, Bill Gardner, who talked about how they achieve that.
I think that there are definitely some scares to be had, but I think a lot of the creepiness really is about that philosophy, or the philosophies, I should say, because there's many different beliefs in the city, and to see those things pushed out to the extreme. And I think you look at a lot of Kubrick's work, I think there's some unique twist to horror in a lot of his work, right? I mean, I think he doesn't necessarily have to rely on complete darkness. He doesn't have to rely on death and decay to make something that's terrifying. I mean, you look at The Shining, look how bright that is. Look how colorful that is. Look how lush that is. And I'm not saying by any means, I'm not trying to compare the two, but you can see that there's always different ways to take on, familiar themes, I think.
It's just a whisper. They're all ears.
Weapons and abilities can all be upgraded too, but Infinite is light on the RPG side of things.
Feel better already.
I mean, this is an FPS at its core.
Yeah, and what an FPS. Gameplay is so tight. The way all the weapons and abilities play into each other is this orchestra of colour and movement and carnage. And when you get your Skyhook, it not only changes how you move around the levels, but also offers more ways to mix up that combat with quick escapes and launching at enemies with drop-down attacks.
I love moving through the sky like this, Budge, or the sound of that hook spinning, that fluid movement between sky rails. It's just wondrous. You rarely get lost or confused about where you should be going, and you can tell a lot of love has gone into those moving city backdrops.
Yeah, the whole city is a work of art, isn't it? And even when you go off the beaten track, you still feel like each section has a story to tell.
Okay, Miss, can you recall his hair color?
It was, red and curly? He looked Irish to me.
I mean, you could actually go through each room and examine the meaning behind each piece of architecture or statue, or just why the light's hitting it in a certain way. We played this on PC, so we don't know how it's going to look on console, but as you can see, it's just beautiful at every turn.
Yeah, and as a bit of a self-confessed PC snob, I don't feel like the console versions of this game have held back the PC version, kind of like how I felt about the last couple of Crysis games. And the detail. Even in the floorboards, just look at this wood. Marvelous. I even found myself reacting to the screen and leaping back in my chair a bit, which I have not done for a long time. And the sound, Hex. From the ambience, to the combat music, to the creepy tunes. It's incredible. It's a feast for the ears.
Yeah, there's not much to complain about here. I mean, you could say that the AI of the standard goons isn't that complex. I mean, it's still good, but it's not great. Honestly, though, I just wish we could talk about the last hour of the game. Such a spectacular finale that'll just make your mind explode. I had a brilliant time with this. I'm giving it 9.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Yeah, this is one of the finest FPS experiences I've had. It's a moving piece of art. I'm giving it 10 out of 10.
One thing I've learned. If you don't draw first, you don't get to draw at all.
Good game.
So did you guess the game for this week?
It was Painkiller from 2004. Heavily influenced by games like Quake and Doom, you played as Daniel Garner, and it was your mission to prevent the war between heaven and hell. No pressure. It was the first game from developers People Can Fly, the dev team that brought us this week's Gears of War Judgement.
Next week, something a bit special planned. Hex, Goose and I will try to decide once and for all which gaming decade was the greatest. The 80s, the 90s, or the noughties.
Don't drink the water. They put something in it to make you forget.
Lots of arguments and debate, plus we have a few friends dropping in. Till next time, may all your games be good ones. Hex out.
Bajo out. Do you want to hear the rest of my motorbike story?
Oh, go on then.
Okay, well, basically, the bikes are really fast, so you just gotta run up there and they put all these jumps. You don't care.